What hurts more? Losing someone you love? Or realizing they were never yours to begin with? I used to think heartbreak only happened when someone left. I was wrong. Sometimes the real heartbreak is standing right beside the person you love, and knowing you were never the one they were looking at. I loved him in silence. I prayed for him in secret. I imagined a future that only existed inside my heart. And the day he smiled at her, I understood something. Some love stories are never meant to be written. And mine was just a chapter in his. My name is Ellie. And this is the story of how I loved someone who was never mine. And how it broke me in ways I didn't know were possible. It was my first day at uni. New campus. New faces. New fears. I remember clutching my notebook tightly, pretending to look confident, while silently panicking inside. And then I saw him. Standing near the notice board. White shirt. Sleeves rolled up. Laughing at something his mate said. There are moments in life that feel ordinary to everyone else, but unforgettable to you. That was mine. I didn't know his name. I didn't know his story. But something inside me whispered, he's going to matter. I tried not to stare. Failed. He turned slightly, and for a second, our eyes met. Just 1 second. But it was enough to leave a mark. I looked away quickly, embarrassed at how fast my heart had started racing. Calm down, Ellie, I muttered to myself. I had no idea that this calm was about to disappear forever. A week later, it absolutely chucked it down. The kind of rain that lashes without warning. I'd forgotten my brolly, of course I had. I was standing near the gate, watching everyone leave in pairs, sharing umbrellas, laughing. And I stood there alone. Then I heard a voice behind me. You planning to build a house here? I turned. It was him. Up close, he looked even better. His hair slightly messy from the wind. His eyes soft but confident. I'm waiting for it to ease off, I said. He looked at the sky and shook his head. Not happening anytime soon. He lifted his brolly slightly. I've got space. 2 simple words. I've got space. I stepped closer. We walked slowly under one brolly. Shoulders almost touching. The air smelled like rain. And something else, something warm. I'm James, he said. James. I repeated it in my head like it was something sacred. Ellie. He smiled. And I swear, in that moment, I felt chosen. Isn't it funny how we create meanings out of ordinary gestures? He was just being kind. But I turned that kindness into hope. We started talking after that. Small conversations at first. Then longer ones. Library discussions that turned into life confessions. Canteen tea breaks that somehow felt like rituals. He was easy to talk to. He listened. Actually listened. He noticed things. You don't take much sugar in your tea, he said once. Handing me a cup with a biscuit on the side. I stared at him. How do you know? You make a face when it's too sweet. I laughed. But inside, something bloomed. He notices me. And sometimes that's all it takes. At night, I would replay our conversations. Every word. Every laugh. I would imagine telling him how I felt. But then fear would creep in. What if I'm imagining everything? What if this is just friendship? What if I lose him? So I stayed silent. Because silence felt safer than rejection. One afternoon, we were sitting on the campus stairs. He looked unusually serious. Do you believe in destiny? He asked. Sometimes, I replied. He took a deep breath. There's someone I've fancied for years. My heart skipped. Not in excitement. In warning. She never really noticed me before, he continued. But now I think maybe there's a chance. I forced a smile. Oh, who? He looked down, almost shy. You'll meet her soon. And that was the moment I realized. I wasn't the girl in his story. I was just the listener. That night, I cried quietly. Not because he had done anything wrong. But because I had started dreaming without permission. Her name was Sophie. She was beautiful in a way that didn't try too hard. Confident. Graceful. The kind of girl who walks into a room and owns it without effort. When he introduced us, he sounded proud. Ellie's my closest mate. Closest mate. The words felt warm and painful at the same time. Sophie smiled at me kindly, and I knew instantly she wasn't the villain. She was just the girl he loved. And I was just the girl who loved him. He started asking for my advice. Should I text her this? Do you reckon she'll like this gift? Is this too much? And I helped him. Every single time. I edited his messages. I suggested sweet gestures. I told him what girls appreciate. I helped him become perfect. Perfect for someone else. Do you know what's the most painful type of love? The one where you build the bridge that leads him away from you. But I told myself something. If he's happy, that should be enough. Right. Wrong. Because every time he smiled after talking to her, a small piece of me broke. Months passed. They grew closer. And I grew quieter. One night, my phone rang. It was James. His voice shaking with excitement. She said yes. My throat tightened. Yes to what? I whispered. I told her everything. And she feels the same. I congratulated him. I even laughed. Finally. Took you long enough. He chuckled. Couldn't have done it without you. And that was the cruel truth. He couldn't have won her without me. After the call ended, I stared at the ceiling in darkness. And for the first time, I allowed myself to whisper the words I had buried for months. I love you. But the only person who heard them was me. I thought that would be the hardest part. Watching him love someone else. I was wrong. The hardest part was yet to come. Because sometimes, life doesn't just break your heart once. It waits. And then breaks it properly. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself love doesn't always mean possession. I told myself being his closest mate was enough. But the heart doesn't understand logic. It only understands longing. After he and Sophie officially started going out, everything changed, slowly, quietly, painfully. He still met me on campus. Still shared tea with me. Still complained about assignments and boring lectures. But now, there was always a she in every conversation. Sophie likes this song. Sophie hates rainy days. Sophie wants to visit the Lake District someday. Sophie. 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 Her name started living between every sentence. And I smiled through it all. Because loving someone silently means mastering the art of pretending. At first, I thought I was strong. I convinced myself that his happiness mattered more than my feelings. But strength fades when you're alone. At night, I would scroll through their pictures. He had posted one of them at a cafe, her head slightly tilted toward him, his smile softer than I had ever seen. The caption read, "Some waits are worth it." I stared at that line for a long time. Some waits are worth it. I wondered. Was I just practice for the person he truly waited for? I locked my phone and cried quietly so no one in the flat would hear. Because how do you explain crying over someone who isn't yours? One afternoon, I saw them together from a distance. They were walking across campus. His hand holding hers. That simple gesture. That casual, natural intimacy. It felt like someone pressed on a bruise I didn't know was that deep. He looked happy. Not the polite happy he showed everyone. But peaceful. Complete. I turned away before he could see me. Because for the first time, I didn't trust my smile. Days passed. He started calling less. Texting less. Not intentionally. Just, naturally. His world was expanding. And I was no longer at the center of it. One evening, my phone buzzed. A message from him. Sorry, couldn't chat today. Took Sophie out. She wasn't feeling well. I typed, "It's okay." Then erased the heart. Typed again. "It's okay. Take care of her. Take care of her." The words felt heavy. But I meant them. That was the worst part. I genuinely wanted him to be happy. Even if it wasn't with me. But life has a strange way of testing your limits. One day, Sophie messaged me. "Can we meet? I need to talk." My stomach tightened. We met at a small cafe near campus. She looked different. Not glowing. Not confident. Just tired. "I don't know who else to talk to," she said softly. "Is everything all right?" I asked. She hesitated. "He talks about you a lot." My heart skipped. "In a good way," she added quickly. "You're important to him." Important. That word again. "He trusts you," she continued. "Sometimes I feel like I'm competing with you." I blinked. Competing? If only she knew. "You don't need to feel that way," I said gently. "He loves you." She studied my face, searching for something. And I prayed she wouldn't find it. Because if she looked closely enough, she would see my heart breaking in real time. After that conversation, something shifted inside me. For the first time, I realized my presence might be unfair. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because my feelings weren't neutral. And love, when hidden, can still be dangerous. So I started stepping back. Replying slower. Declining meetups. Making excuses. He noticed. "You've been a bit distant," he said one day. "Just busy," I lied. He frowned. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" I almost laughed. If only you knew. If only I could say it. If only I was brave enough to risk everything. But I wasn't. Because loving him was painful. But losing him completely? That terrified me more. Then something unexpected happened. One evening, he called. Not excited. Not cheerful. Broken. "Can you meet me?" His voice sounded different. We met at the same campus stairs where he once asked me about destiny. He looked exhausted. "What happened?" I asked quietly. He ran his hands through his hair. "We had a row. With Sophie." He nodded. "It's stupid. But she thinks I'm too close to you." My chest tightened. "What did you say?" "I told her you're just my best mate. That she has nothing to worry about." Just my best mate. The words stung more than I expected. He looked at me carefully. "You're not pulling away because of this, are you?" I forced a smile. "Of course not." He sighed. "I don't want to lose either of you." Either of you. And suddenly, I understood something painful. I was never an option. I was a comfort zone. A safe place. But not a choice. Weeks later, their rows became more frequent. I didn't ask for details. But he told me anyway. "She says I compare her to you. She says I'm more relaxed around you. She says I don't open up to her the way I do to you." Every word felt like a knife wrapped in validation. Because somewhere deep inside, a selfish part of me whispered, "Maybe he needs you more. Maybe you matter more." But that voice scared me. Because I never wanted to be the reason his relationship failed. I never wanted to win like that. So I did the only thing I thought was right. I distanced myself even more. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late. Almost midnight. My phone rang. "James." I answered immediately. His voice was hollow. "It's over." The words echoed. "What?" She ended it. Silence filled the space between us. "Why?" I whispered. He laughed bitterly. "She said she can't compete with a ghost." A ghost. That she feels like there's always something between us that I don't admit. My heart pounded. "And is there?" I almost asked. But I didn't. Because some questions, once answered, destroy everything. He sounded lost. "I don't understand." "I love her." Love. Present tense. I closed my eyes. "I love her," he repeated, as if convincing himself. And that was the moment I realized. Even single, he still wasn't mine. The next few weeks were heavy. He was quieter. More withdrawn. I stayed by his side. Like always. Listening. Supporting. Healing him from a heartbreak that I secretly wished had chosen me instead. One evening, he looked at me and said softly, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And for a split second, Hope flickered again. Stupid, fragile hope. But then he added, "You're the one person who never leaves. Never leaves." That's what I was. Reliable. Constant. Safe. But not loved the way I wanted to be. Time passed. Graduation approached. Life was moving forward whether I was ready or not. On our last day at campus, we sat together watching the sunset. 4 years. Countless memories. Unspoken feelings. "I'm going to miss this," he said quietly. "Me too." He turned toward me. "You'll always be special to me, Ellie." Special. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You too." He hesitated. Then hugged me. Tightly. Longer than usual. And for a second, I let myself pretend. Pretend that this meant more. Pretend that maybe, just maybe, he felt something he never said. But when he pulled away, his eyes were calm. Not conflicted. Not in love. Just grateful. And that's when I understood. Sometimes the twist in a love story isn't betrayal. It's realization. The realization that you were never the heroine. You were the lesson. But life wasn't done with me yet. Because just when I thought this was the end of our story, fate decided to rewrite everything. And what happened next is something I never saw coming. Years passed. Not dramatically. Not with fireworks or cinematic music. Just quietly. Like seasons changing when you're too busy surviving to notice. After graduation, life separated us the way life separates most people who once thought they were permanent. He moved to another city for work. I stayed closer to home. Different routines. Different circles. Different worlds. At first, we kept in touch. Late-night calls about new jobs, nightmare bosses, adult responsibilities. He would still say, "You're the only one who gets me." And I would still listen. But the calls became weekly, then monthly, then occasional. And one day, they simply stopped. No row. No dramatic goodbye. Just distance. And maybe that's how some love stories truly end. Not with closure, but with silence. I changed too. I had to. Loving someone who was never yours teaches you one important thing. You can't build your life around hope. So I focused on myself. I started working at a publishing house. New colleagues. New challenges. New distractions. I learned how to smile without thinking of him. I learned how to go through an entire day without checking if he had texted. I learned how to breathe without that constant ache in my chest. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It just means the memories stop bleeding. They become scars instead. Then one evening, 3 years later, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in a long time. James. For a moment, I just stared at it. My heart didn't race the way it used to. But it did pause. I answered. "Hello." His voice sounded older. Calmer. "Ellie." Just my name. And suddenly, 3 years felt like 3 seconds. We talked for an hour that night. About work. About life. About how fast everything changes. He told me he had switched jobs. I told him about my promotion. We avoided the past like it was fragile glass. But before hanging up, he said something that stayed with me. "I'll be down south next week. We should meet up. We should meet up." Simple words. Dangerous words. I told myself it was nothing. Just 2 old mates catching up. I chose a simple outfit that day. Nothing too careful. Nothing that screamed I still care. When I saw him standing outside the cafe, something inside me shifted. He looked the same. But different. More mature. More grounded. He smiled when he saw me. And for a second, I saw the uni boy again. We hugged. Not too long. Not too distant. Just familiar. We sat down. Ordered coffee. And began catching up like no time had passed. But time had passed. We just didn't know how to acknowledge it. Halfway through the conversation, he grew quiet. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. My stomach tightened. I had imagined this moment in 100 different ways. In some versions, he confessed he had realized his feelings too late. In others, he apologized for not seeing me back then. But life doesn't follow imagination. I'm getting married, he said softly. And there it was. The final, clean break. For a second, the world felt muted. Like someone had lowered the volume of everything around me. But I smiled. Congratulations. And I meant it. Or at least, I wanted to. She's amazing, he continued. Her name is Olivia. We met at work. I nodded, listening carefully. Not because I wanted to know. But because this time, I refused to be the girl who pretends she isn't strong. Are you happy? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Yes. And strangely, that answer didn't shatter me. It didn't rip my heart open the way Sophie's name once had. Instead, it settled something inside me. A quiet understanding. This was never my story to win. After we left the cafe, he walked me to my car. Ellie, he said gently. You've always been important to me. Important. That word had followed me for years. But this time, it didn't hurt. Because I finally understood what it meant. Important doesn't always mean irreplaceable. It doesn't always mean loved the way you hope. Sometimes it just means valued. And that's okay. I'm glad you were part of my life, he added. Were. Past tense. I smiled. Me too. And for the first time in years, there was no hidden confession sitting in my throat. No desperate wish. No silent choose me. Just acceptance. I thought that was the end. The final chapter. The closure I never had. But fate had one last twist waiting for me. 2 weeks before his wedding, I received an invitation. He had personally asked for my address. The card was elegant. Simple. His name printed beside hers. I stared at it for a long time. Should I go? Should I watch the man I once loved promise forever to someone else? Old Ellie would have said no. She would have protected her fragile heart. But new Ellie, she was stronger. So I went. The wedding venue was glowing with lights and laughter. Music filled the air. Families celebrating. Friends cheering. And there he was. Dressed as a groom. Smiling. Confident. Certain. When our eyes met, he smiled warmly and walked toward me. You came. Of course. He looked relieved. I'm really chuffed you're here. And I realized something unexpected. There was no regret in his eyes. No hidden longing. No what if. Just peace. And that was my final answer. Whatever I felt for him. It had lived only in me. The ceremony began. I watched as he said his vows. Watched as he held her hand. Watched as he promised forever. And instead of breaking, I felt something else. Gratitude. Because loving him had taught me depth. It had taught me patience. It had taught me that not all love is meant to be returned. Some love is meant to transform you. When the ceremony ended, I stepped outside for air. The night sky was clear. Quiet. And for the first time in years, my heart felt light. Not empty. Just free. As I stood there, someone approached me. You must be Ellie. I turned. It was Olivia. The bride. She smiled gently. He's told me about you. My chest tightened slightly. All good things, she added quickly. He says you were the reason he believed in love when things were confusing. That caught me off guard. He says you taught him what emotional honesty looks like. I didn't know what to say. Because I had never thought of my role in his life that way. Maybe I wasn't the love story. Maybe I was the lesson that prepared him for one. Olivia squeezed my hand lightly. Thank you, she said sincerely. And in that moment, something inside me healed completely. I left the wedding early. Not because I was hurting. But because I didn't need to stay. I had finally understood the twist. He wasn't mine. He was never meant to be mine. He was a chapter. A beautiful, painful, transformative chapter. And sometimes, that's enough. But the story doesn't end here. Because the biggest twist wasn't losing him. The biggest twist was what happened after I let him go. I didn't cry when I came home from his wedding. That surprised me the most. I removed my earrings, folded my dress carefully, washed my face, looked at myself in the mirror. For years, I had imagined this moment differently. I thought if he ever married someone else, I would collapse, break, lose something essential inside me. But standing there in my quiet room, I felt calm. Not because I never loved him, but because I finally understood something. He wasn't mine. And he never was. And that truth, once fully accepted, stops hurting. Life moved forward again. Work became busier. Responsibilities grew heavier. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I no longer waited for messages that weren't coming. I no longer built imaginary futures in my head. I started saying yes to things I once avoided. Office drinks, weekend trips, new friendships. For the first time, I wasn't holding space for someone who didn't belong in it. And that made room for something unexpected. His name was Tom. He joined our publishing house 6 months after James's wedding. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't overly charming. He didn't walk into rooms like he owned them. He was steady, quietly observant. The kind of man who listens more than he speaks. The first time we spoke, it wasn't magical. It was about deadlines, revisions, edits, ordinary things. And maybe that's why it felt safe. There was no thunderstorm in my chest. No dramatic racing heartbeat. Just ease. We started having lunch together during long workdays. He noticed when I skipped meals. He remembered how I liked my coffee without asking twice. But unlike before, I didn't turn these gestures into fantasies. I had learned. Kindness is not a promise. Attention is not love. Consistency is what matters. And Tom was consistent. Not just when it was convenient. Not just when he was bored. Always. One evening, after a particularly exhausting week, he walked me to my car. "You look knackered," he said gently. "I am. You don't have to carry everything on your own." The sentence hit differently. Because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was sincere. And suddenly, I realized something. With James, I had always felt like I was fighting for space in his world. With Tom, I didn't have to fight at all. There was room for me naturally. Weeks turned into months. We began spending time outside work. Bookshops. Small cafes. Long drives with no particular destination. He never rushed me. Never pushed. Never assumed. One night, sitting across from him at a quiet roadside tea stall, he asked softly, "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. "Why do you look like you've loved deeply before, but don't allow yourself to anymore?" The question stunned me. Because no one had ever put it into words like that. I looked at my tea. Took a deep breath. And for the first time, I told someone the whole story. Not dramatically. Not as a tragedy. Just truth. About loving someone silently. About being the best mate. About watching him marry someone else. Tom listened without interrupting. When I finished, he didn't give advice. He didn't criticize James. He didn't say I deserved better. He simply said, "That must have hurt like hell." And somehow, that acknowledgement meant more than any grand speech. Time passed. Slowly, gently, something inside me began to open again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't obsession. It wasn't longing from a distance. It wasn't building bridges for someone else to cross. It was mutual. Balanced. Peaceful. One evening, as we walked under soft streetlights, he stopped. "I don't want to rush you," he said. "And I know you've been hurt before. But I need to tell you something honestly. My heart beat steadily, not wildly. I care about you, Ellie. Not because you're strong. Not because you're independent. Not because you don't need anyone." He stepped closer. "I care about you because I see you. And I want to stand beside you. Not ahead. Not behind. Beside." There it was. Not fireworks. Not chaos. Just clarity. And for the first time in my life, Love didn't feel like falling. It felt like arriving. I thought about James that night. Not with longing. Not with regret. But with gratitude. Because if he had chosen me back then, I would have accepted half-love. I would have mistaken intensity for compatibility. I would have believed that fighting for someone constantly was romantic. But losing him taught me something priceless. Love should not feel like begging. It should not feel like guessing. It should not feel like building someone else's happiness while hiding your own tears. Real love feels safe. It feels mutual. It feels calm. Months later, I received a message from an unknown number. "Hey, it's James." I smiled softly. "Hi." We exchanged a few updates. He sounded happy. Married life was treating him well. Before the conversation ended, he wrote something that surprised me. "You know, I used to think you were just my best mate. But over the years, I realized you were the reason I understood how to love properly." I stared at the message. Not with pain, but with peace. "Thank you," I replied. And I meant it. Because sometimes, being someone's lesson is not a tragedy. It's purpose. A year later, I stood in a wedding venue again. But this time, I wasn't sitting in the audience. I was wearing white and gold. And the man waiting at the end of the aisle wasn't someone I had to fight for. He was someone who chose me clearly, confidently, without confusion. Tom looked at me the way I once wished someone would. Not with gratitude, not with comfort,
This place is
but
beautiful.
with love.
It really is.
When
I'm
he
glad
held
we
my
came.
hand during
Me
the
too.
vows,
Let's walk.
I didn't
Sounds
feel
perfect.
fear. I didn't feel doubt. I felt certainty. And that was the biggest twist of all. The girl who once cried over loving someone who wasn't hers was now standing beside someone who never made her question
How
her
about a
place.
coffee date this
If
weekend?
you ask me
I'd love
today
that.
what hurt
Saturday?
more,
Perfect. It's a
losing
date.
someone I loved, or realizing he was never mine, I would say neither. Because the real pain was not understanding my worth back then. And the real healing was discovering it later. He wasn't mine. And yes, it broke me. But sometimes, breaking is necessary. Because the heart needs to shatter once. To recognize the hands that truly know how to hold it. And that is how my story ends. Not with the man I once loved, but with the man who loved me back.